Good morning to you all. I hope you can all hear me, and despite this difficult period of the pandemic and the lockdown, all of you are maintaining good spirits, keeping safe and well along with your loved ones. It's a great pleasure to have you with us join this very interesting course that Priya International Academy is doing in partnership with Association of Indian Universities. This week-long course was signed up by 1,571 of you. We had to stop registration on Friday evening last week. And we have found out that nearly 600 of you have been reading the materials in the 2 days on Monday and Tuesday. I am also delighted that nearly 400 of you have submitted your short assignment by this morning as we begin. And I want to encourage all of you, those who are in the webinar right now and others, to take a moment and complete that assignment very much. My name is Dr. Rajesh Tandon. I am founder president of Priya, Participatory Research in Asia. And over the last 40 plus years, we have been practicing community-based participatory research as a methodology of generating new knowledge, creating empowerment of the communities, and support to improving their lives. Over the last 8 years, along with my colleague Dr. Bud Hall, I am also UNESCO co-chair on community-based research and social responsibility of higher education. Over the last 9-10 years, I have had the privilege to work with the Planning Commission, with Niti Aayog, with University Grants Commission, and with AIU in helping develop policies and programs which support university community engagement under the framework of enhanced social responsibility of higher education. In doing so, I discovered that most of the common understanding of community university engagement is one way. University telling the community what to do and how to do it. And in the process, students under NSS or other schemes have gone out and spent time in the community more in terms of one-way communication or instruction than a two-way interaction. So as you have already discovered in the readings and the illustrations and the case studies of the last 2 days, and I look forward to reading all of your assignments. And in fact, I would also like to give many of you feedback about how to improve what you have written in the course of the coming week. And but by and large, even when Unnat Bharat Abhiyan began 5 years ago, and even when Unnat Bharat Abhiyan 2.0 was launched in 2018, the common understanding of community university engagement has continued to be one way. University tells the community what to do. University produces technology which solves community problem. And therefore, in this course, as you have noticed, we have emphasized engagement in teaching, engagement in research, as well as engagement in service. You perhaps have already read the new UGC policy on fostering social responsibility, which was part of the reading in previous couple of days. You may have also seen AICTE policy. Those of you who are from technical institutions. That policy looks at community university engagement holistically. Because the expert group which framed that policy realized that most of the time community engagement is ghettoized, is localized in departments of social work or extension or um, community education or but many disciplines, many faculties do not in fact think community engagement has anything to do with that. So the policy now encourages all faculties, all departments. There are examples in that document to say how students of chemistry can not only do experiments in the laboratory, but also test water and soil in the local community and provide some feedback to farmers and community members. So we are hoping that those of you who are championing community university engagement in your institutions would encourage your peers to also look at community engagement in a holistic way. Today, the webinar focuses on engaged research. Now, by and large, research happens either in the library or in the laboratory or in the field. And many of my colleagues who do field research say, oh, we are doing engaged research, we are engaging in the field. I want to present to you a more holistic view of how engaged research can happen. And in today's webinar, which is scheduled till 12 o'clock, I will speak for another 20 minutes or so, and then you are sending questions and comments, and I will try and respond to as many as I can in the time we have. But this relationship is not limited to webinar, and those of you who want to continue this conversation can do so. You have our phone numbers and emails and contact addresses. So let me start. Within the framework of community university engagement, where we move towards engaged teaching, engaged research, and engaged service, today we talk about engaged research. I am sharing this PPT. It will also be available to you all later on. We'll send it to you, and you can make use of it as you like. So let me start by saying most of us talk about research, but the purpose of research is linked to knowledge, both knowledge production, knowledge reproduction, and knowledge dissemination. However, we have come to realize that knowledge does not reside only in academia or in formal research institutes. There are multiple forms and sites of knowledge, including in the world of practice. But in many societies, including our own, control over knowledge historically has been also a means of controlling the minds and actions of communities. The history of Brahmanical control, where only Brahmins could study Sanskrit, the same applies in China, same applies in Europe. Latin could not be studied by those who were not priests or bishops. And linguistic control, these are ways to control knowledge. These are also ways of saying what is knowledge, what is scientific knowledge, and what is not. However, while control over knowledge efforts have continued in history, we also know from our own history that bottom-up subaltern voices challenging that dominant knowledge system have also been there. We can remember Nanak, Kabir, Tagore, Gandhi, and many others in different parts of our region who have challenge the dominance of one form of knowledge, one language, one way of saying this is valid knowledge. I was recently reading Gangesh Upadhyay's document of the 12th century, Tattvapani, and fascinating conversation about different forms of knowledge so many years ago. In the current period, there are many of you who may be familiar with several terminologies related to research. Action research is the first terminology which came during the Second World War in 1940s. It was only in early 70s that the phrase participatory research began to get some visibility, some conceptualization. Now, what does this mean? How did this participatory research come about? And what can we learn from this? It is in the world of practice when communities and researchers interacted that they realized that certain forms of knowledge was only available in the community, and the conceptual theoretical knowledge that researchers brought could either add value or become dismissive. So community-based participatory research is an attempt to synthesize the knowledge that comes from the world of practice, from communities, from local experiences, the forms of knowledge we call indigenous knowledge, as well as the knowledge that comes from the world of academia, research institutes, laboratories. So, how did the development of community-based participatory research happen? In our country, research tools and methods began to be developed in 1980s, and they were applied in planning and monitoring. Some of you may have heard about PRA, and the most popular PRA method that people use is Venn diagram or transect walk. Anywhere I go, I hear people say, oh, we know participatory research, it is Venn diagram and transect walk. PRA stands for Participatory Research Approach, and its history is Participatory Rural Appraisal. Short form is PRA. In our work, we applied participatory research in planning, in monitoring, in evaluation. Why? Wherever you need data, wherever you need information, wherever you need to collect data, you can use this methodology. By late 1980s, early 1990s, in social science research in our country, a small module was introduced in research methodology called participatory research. Some schools of social work and sociology adapted it more than others. In the public programs of the government, the first place that they were used in our country was literacy. You may remember the literacy mission in the late 80s, early 90s, and total literacy campaigns and literacy assessments, levels of literacy assessments, both before literacy classes began and afterwards, had utilized participatory research tools and methods. In the current century, in the last 15, 18 years, and more recently you may have come across the phrase PRA being used in sanitation campaigns, health campaigns, water campaigns, wash programs, and this is a more practical use of participatory research. So, what are some of the key principles? And this I want to emphasize because, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people do research in the field. A lot of people are trained to do engagement in the field, but it retains its traditional connotation because every stage of research is unilaterally controlled and designed by the academic researchers themselves. This is important because I would like all of us to understand that we need to take a look at how community-based participatory research is different. And it is different when we start with principle one. We acknowledge that local knowledge exists in communities. We acknowledge that illiterate, semi-literate farmers, laborers, fisher folks, tribals are also knowledgeable. And we give value to that knowledge. In the last 20 years, knowledge about forestry, about watershed, about farming practices, all has come only when we value what our farmers, our tribals, our forest dwellers knew. So research then becomes an act of building partnership. It means that we are co-constructing new knowledge. We are not just collecting data for community, we are also framing research questions together. Research questions which have relevance to my work as an academic, but also has relevance to their situation. It can help them improve their situation. It may have to do with health, it may have to do with water, it may have to do with child rearing practices, it may have to do with use of new technology in agriculture. Doesn't matter, whatever. So we co-construct knowledge, and in order to co-construct knowledge, we build partnerships of trust. This, I believe, is the very critical issue in our context, because historically our students and academics and researchers of all kinds, whether they are in universities or NGOs or wherever they are, government departments, they've gone out in the communities with predetermined questionnaires and instruments collecting data, and people don't understand why this data is collected, and obviously the data is never shared back with them. So they can't use that data. We, of course, write reports, receive research funds, we publish them in journals and books and attend conferences and make presentations. But the knowledge so developed can also be used locally. There is no dichotomy, there is no contradiction between local use of that knowledge by local actors and more universal use of that knowledge by academics. But this will only happen when research is framed together, co-constructed. There is a partnership of trust, and we value what they produce. We value the knowledge that they have. We don't say, you know everything and I know nothing, just as we don't say, you know nothing, I know everything. We say, you know quite a bit, we also know quite a bit. Let us try and figure out how we can together learn more. How can we know more? So this is the important part of building a community-based participatory research, or what in more generic language is called engaged research. Now, let me show you the next slide, and talk about data collection and data analysis. Once we realize that knowledge exists beyond academia, beyond research institutes, we also then begin to realize that that knowledge that exists in the communities is not necessarily compiled in the form of books or journal articles or printed word. Historically, in all societies, and most certainly in our own, that knowledge has been passed on from generations through oral and symbolic cultural events. In fact, ceremonies, cultural functions, fairs, community dialogues have been the most common methods of sharing knowledge between one generation and other. And that practice still continues in our tribal communities, in our rural communities, even in some of our informal settlements today. So what engaged research therefore allows us or enables us to do is to look at how knowledge is produced. What in technical jargon we call epistemology. Epistemology means how do we know we know. In the so-called modern version of that epistemology, which started in post-industrial revolution Europe, emphasis was only on cognitive method of knowing. It means you only use your head. You think you know. And a lot of this was influenced from mathematics and physics in the early days. But emotions, affect as a form of knowing. Music, arts, dance, drama, theater, puppetry, paintings, and nowadays using digital means of doing the same are also legitimate modes of knowledge production, of data collection. And action research actually emerged from the belief that when you act, then you know. So there are many phenomena in our lives, in our world, which we only find out after we act. In some way, without acting on a situation, new knowledge may not be generated. So cognition, affect, and action, all three are equally legitimate modes of knowing. The second myth that has been perpetuated, particularly because people got hooked to PRA tools, is that, participatory research is qualitative and scientific research is quantitative. So a whole bunch of people make this distinction. This is artificial. We have shown you in this slide a census of pavement dwellers in Mumbai conducted by families of pavement dwellers of 5,000 households living on pavements in Mumbai in 1985-86. There are many examples where quantitative tools can also be used in data collection, provided research is co-constructed and carried out in partnership with local communities. Then, of course, there are a number of arts-based methods, as I was mentioning, drawing, music, theater, storytelling, puppetry, which have also gained legitimacy in the process of engaged research, participatory research. The last point I want to make, which has been a major difficulty when people say, oh, I know engaged research, I have used PRA and I've done Transact Walk, is the last point in this slide, which is joint analysis. Joint analysis means that the researcher and research team as well as local community jointly analyze the new information, because locally contextualized explanations can be developed by local communities, and macro frameworks and macro linkages to that explanation can be provided by academia and those who come from academia. So this is an important point I want to emphasize, because in normal readings, when you do the readings, and we can give you any number of readings, emphasis is not made so clearly in how engaged research may seem to be using the same tools: survey, transact walk, mapping, Venn diagram, um, focus group discussion. It doesn't matter. Tools don't matter. How research is co-constructed, how it is carried out in partnership, how its research questions and research findings are used by the community as well as by the researcher. Now, let me take you a little further, because I want to keep time for some Q&A later on, and I may have to therefore run through a little bit of now here, knowledge sharing and mobilization are multiple forms of dissemination of findings to multiple audiences. That example I gave you, and you would know many examples yourself. You can have a presentation of a drawing or a theater from the research findings, just as you can write a research paper, publish it in an academic journal, or draw a policy brief which influences policymakers. So multiple forms of dissemination: community-led knowledge sharing, dialogues, exhibitions. One of the first one of the first studies we did some 20 years ago on sanitation problems in small cities, its results were presented through a exhibition in a public hall, where community members and policymakers and elected representatives walked through and looked at findings. It was almost like an exhibition of findings. So there is no contradiction, there is no conflict between using multiple forms. The main question is that knowledge so generated should serve multiple purposes of research, which we have agreed to. It should serve the purpose of improving the lives of the community, just as it should serve the purpose of engaging other academics on that theme, on that topic, as well as providing feedback and input to policymakers. So I hope you are getting a sense of this. In this webinar, we cannot train you in use of methods. We hope you will learn these later on, either through us or on your own or through other training programs. But once it is clear in your head, then you can pursue. If you think this engaged research makes sense to you, pursue that. And let me just show you one last slide, because it raises some questions about how this method is used, abused sometimes, or not adequately used. So there are a number of practical challenges. Of course, on top of it is the ethical question of mutual accountability. Universities, academics, professional researchers have access to English language in our country. They have access to references and books. They have access to libraries. They have access to research funding. They have access to peers who speak the same language and the same jargon. And communities have experience. They have motivation. They have practical knowledge. They look and speak differently in local dialects, in parables and stories and songs. So they are two different worlds. And because they are two different worlds, partnership makes sense. Partnership only makes sense if different people come together, different types of actors and institutions come together, then they add value. Partnership with somebody just like you doesn't add much value. So, how do we maintain mutual accountability? Is a very practical question. Second is, of course, research funding. We are expected in ICSSR, UGC, AICTE, and future National Research Foundation, which is being set up. All these will ask for a detailed proposal with predetermined research methods as well as instruments of data collection. There will be no space for sharing research findings with the communities. There will be only money available for publication and attending a conference. These are real constraints, not only in India, around the world. But if you believe in it, challenge it. Openings are beginning to happen. Large institutions like universities and small local communities, how can a big wolf share its own resources with the small cats? And this is a perpetual problem. We hide information about our funds and budgets from the community because we think that if we tell them, they will want that money. My experience is in 40 years, community members understand better why we need money, why we get paid what we get paid. They are not grabbing our money, but they are looking for transparency and accountability. And they are certainly looking for support in doing the research with you. And final point is that nowhere in the world, not many places in the world are where training of researchers in research methodology courses trains them in interpersonal skills, how to listen in local language and dialect, how to frame your concepts in local language, and personal positionality, where they openly talk about their values, why are they doing what they're doing. Nowhere, very little opportunity for in the training of researchers. And that is why, as UNESCO chair, we have launched a Knowledge for Change consortium, and you can learn more about it when you visit our websites. So let me say I'm going to stop here, and I can see a large number of questions which have come about in this technology. I'm also learning how to do this virtually. I'm located in somewhere else, and you guys are located somewhere else, and it's interesting, but it is not easy. So I'm going to be able to respond to some of your questions, not all, but as I said in the beginning, if you are interested, this is an ongoing conversation, and I would personally love to work with those of you who want to take this forward. So give me a minute. Let me read some of these questions and have a sip of water as well. This is Shimpa's question. Shimpa Sharma, great question. Can joint research be used for technical subjects? Civil engineering, technical? My background is in engineering, so I can speak about engineering. Civil engineering, what does it do? A civil engineer graduates from IIT Kanpur, like me, goes and works with the PhD department of government of UP. And his job is to design water bodies. He goes to Bundelkhand region. And what he has studied in IIT is not what happens in Bundelkhand. He has studied in IIT what happens in US, Europe, Mumbai, New Delhi, not in Bundelkhand. So instead of looking at the first principles, he takes the model and tries to plant it in Bundelkhand, and the model fails. Indian soil is a national graveyard of such failed models. Any number you can see. But suppose he went to the Bundelkhand region and sort of talked around to the local district collector or BDO and said, well, who are the people who live here, work here? Is there a sarpanch? And is there some local NGOs been working? And I'm in Chitrakoot, and let me talk to Gopal Bhai there. Oh, he's been working for 45 years in watershed. Oh. And the interaction happens. Gopal Bhai's wisdom and experience is made available to the civil engineer, young and handsome, full of bookish knowledge, but his scientific principles and calculations rub off Gopal Bhai, and if they strike a partnership, most sustainable watershed structures are there in Chitrakoot. You can all go and look. So it's not the discipline. Now, in engaged research, how can the involvement of general people be ensured? What? Methodology of communicating with people. How do we engage them? How do we make it relevant? Many of you have worked in projects in the field. You realize what we do, which makes people uncomfortable, and what we do, which makes them involved and listen to us. Not very complicated. That was Ankana Ghosh's question. I'm giving you a quick one because, there's a whole methodology. Huh? Can HEIs like state universities, Manoj Bose, opt for special funds to take PRA forward? Okay, very good question. All of you who are interested in this should begin to ask UGC under the new policy where this methodology is being. There are funds available in UBA 2.0. I am also responsible for monitoring some of those. Ask state governments also to allocate funds. All departments of the government have research and monitoring funds. If you are a state university and in your district, I don't know which state you are in, but if in your district 5 lakh migrant laborers are returning and you ask for some money from your university and state government to do a study of what can be done to rehabilitate them in those local areas, you can ask for it. If you ask for it, it happens. There are many examples around the world where in South Africa, in Malaysia, not just in European Union and in Canada, where researchers began to challenge, saying our knowledge is not being useful, our research is being wasted, we want to do it in partnership with communities, create a separate fund for it. And it is beginning to happen. So, Sunil Gangavane, may I request Mr. Tandon monitoring and evaluation tools? Of course, we will give you, there's lots of links you will find. We also have specialized training programs, both online and mixed mode, on participatory monitoring and evaluation. So my colleagues and I will respond to you, Sunil, with links for sure. Vijay Lakshmi, with respect to research on legal perspectives, we find it difficult to follow non-doctrinal or empirical research. Some courses are, oh, okay, I will work with you, Vijay Lakshmi, and together we can design a research methodology course which can be. But let me put you a very small question in your mind. Just, we in the last 15, 20 years in this country, all kinds of national law institutes and universities have come up around the country. 15, 20 of them, I don't know. Many private Jindals and Amities and others are also there. But which law are they teaching? Have these law students and researchers studied tribal law, the law of the land before the British came and told us what is law? In several states, there are Nyaya Panchayats, constitutionally elected. Bihar is an example. Has any law faculty gone around and helped Nyaya Panchayats develop their locally usable, feasible, doable legal methods, more of prevention and conflict resolution than of fighting legal battle with black coat? That's the question. Next one, Devadat. What should be appropriate sample size for community-based research on a social issue? I gave you the example of We the Invisible, 5,000 households on pavements of Mumbai in 1986. No computer was available. Data was collected, tabulated, piece of paper by kids who were born on the pavements with support from a couple of researchers who had not even finished 5th grade school. What do you think? Tabulation is a complicated exercise. Very easy. Once I understand why it is useful for me, I will do it. So, the problem of language is serious, Devadat. It's very serious. It is a problem that is universal, and I can assure you that no sustainable development of any community, society, or planet can happen if the concepts and language of that is limited to 3 European languages: English, French, and Spanish. Won't happen. I am recently editing a book along with Bud Hall. It will come out end of the year on new examples of social responsibility. And there is a fantastic case study from Qatar. And if you Google it, you will find this story, I'm sure, where Qatar University, support from the government, decided to shift language of discourse from English to Arabic 7-8 years ago. Fantastic. Suddenly, more local students started joining. Suddenly, more local knowledge started being taught. Because when English was the medium of teaching and research, it was the English interpretation of local knowledge that was taught. We are familiar with that in this country. Huh? Even Hindi interpretation of Telugu or Maithili or Awadhi or Marathi or Tamil is as hegemonic as English interpretation of any Indian language. So this is an important issue. We all need to struggle with it. Ankana Ghosh comes back. Ankana, there are some reading materials you read, you will see, and go on the website, then you will see what's the history of action research, what's the history of participatory research, how these phraseologies have developed over the last 50 years, and which ones combine what. Important thing to remember is the normative and value principles in engaged research. Now, let me see. Bharat, social science research and applied research difference in community participation. Community participation can also be to control the community. When you do research in partnership with local community, you frame the research questions, you collect data, you analyze data, and you disseminate findings in partnership with each step. It has difficulty, but that is when it is authentic, and that is when your research in partnership with the community leads to improvements in communities. Communities will change only when they understand the new knowledge, not when we preach new knowledge. In any case, they don't read our journal articles, so it doesn't matter. Rajesh has a very good question. Rajesh Manot, how to encourage students from backward rural areas so poor for social engagement without stipend or remuneration? Well, the point is this. Community-based research is not a cheap version of knowledge production. We have a mindset that when you go to shopping mall, the dress you buy is meant for middle class, upper middle class. It comes in a hanger or box. And when you go to a street vendor selling similar trousers or shirts, they are hanging or lying on the floor, and obviously they are cheaper quality. Affordability does not make the question of research engaged. If travel is required, pay for it. Doesn't matter whether students are rich or poor. They are working on research with you. So please, a lot of people think that by doing PRA, the predecessor of PRA was rapid rural appraisal. And why it was rapid? So that researchers can quickly collect some data and help the planners develop a plan. Communities don't even know what plan has been developed till a bulldozer arises in front of their huts saying this land is now going to be used for mining. How many times this is going to happen? And how many times we will be a party to this? That is the question. We provide intellectual legitimacy to this kind of a thing. Mahua Roy Karmakar, observation being a tool of participatory might have some possibility. Yes, observation, provided I have very good colleagues who are trained anthropologists. I also studied some of that when I was doing my management education. And I read William Footwhite's excellent methodology of the book called Street Corner Society. The gangs of youngsters on the streets of Chicago. Wonderful chapter on methodology in his book. I'm sure some of you have read it. I have also read the critique of Margaret Mead, the madam who promoted the discipline of anthropology. What is the critique? By observing African villagers wearing little bit of cloth, eating some fruits from the trees, and walking around hunting or fishing, she and people like her concluded that they were primitive. And as primitives, they needed to be modernized. And who was modern? London was modern. I am so delighted that pandemic has shown who's modern and who's not modern. Highest incidence of deaths are taking place in the so-called citadels of modernity today. Highest rates of infection are taking place in centers of urban wealth in India. So let us say they are different. They are contextually okay. But they're not stupid, they're not primitive, they have a body of knowledge. Exactly what we did to our tribal people. Anthropologists, first Britishers and then Indian anthropologists. Who is providing you the wisdom of organic farming? Who is providing you today the wisdom of water harvesting locally? Who is providing you the wisdom of natural habitats where forest produce is used and grown? The amlas of this world. You know, indigenous people have a body of knowledge. They don't write books. They don't have PhDs. We need to learn to respect that knowledge, value that knowledge, and work in partnership with that knowledge. Only then we can create a livable post-pandemic world in our country and around the world. I want to thank you all for being active on the webinar. So many of you have other questions, I'm sure. And I want to encourage you once again to please complete your assignments. Those of you who have not done, I want to encourage you to complete the course the next 2 days. There is an assignment at the end of the 5th day as well. And we would give you all who complete the course and the assignment a formal certificate, which will be issued Association of Indian Universities and Priya International Academy. But more importantly, I want to encourage you, stimulate you to think of how you can do serious community engagement in your teaching and research work. And we would be very happy to support you, nudge you, train you, work with you, link you up with others who can support you if you take that step forward even more seriously in the time to come. Thank you very much, and I look forward to further opportunities of interacting with you all. I also want to thank my colleagues in Association of Indian University as well as in Priya International Academy, in particular Jigme, Nayanika, Amit, and Kaustav, and Sonu, and Sujit, who have made this technological communication and interaction possible. Thank you all. Have a safe time together, but look forward to a new world. Thank you.